Death. A sad, tragic, and yet, dare I say, highly controversial topic. I'm talking about Fire Emblem. Should probably preface that before we go any further into this otherwise Kirby-filled video. For those who aren't in the know, I'll summarize it quick. For a long time, Fire Emblem had a system of permadeath where if a character of yours died, they were dead for good. You could never use them again in your playthrough. The 12th game, New Mystery of the Emblem, introduced a casual mode where, instead of staying dead, your units retreated and could be used again at the start of the next map. Which is a really good topic that could get me big. But for once I'm not talking about gameplay for a video, we're talking about story, so I guess I have to start from the top. Death. A sad, tragic, and, dare I say, highly controversial topic. Still talking about Fire Emblem here. These stories can either handle the topic and theming of death with immense care and brilliant execution, or let's call it quality, lack thereof. Let's go with that. The series is wildly inconsistent with how effectively it handles this heavy-hitting topic, but something that I've always found kind of amusing, given how both franchises appear on the outset, is how much better the Kirby franchise can handle killing off its important characters. If you don't know Kirby very well, I can only imagine how you reacted to that last sentence. But one of the aspects of the Kirby games that I think goes severely underappreciated, even by the fans in many instances, is how Kirby deals with death. Before we go any further, since we're talking about characters dying in stories and all that, I can't avoid talking about spoilers. Therefore, the games you see on the screen right now will have some form of spoilers in them, varying from minor to major. If you'd rather stay unspoiled, look, I get it. You've been warned. I have a channel bloated with videos on both of these franchises without spoilers. Watch them instead. And, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, get my year-end goal of 2,500 subscribers, all that jazz. Also, this last bit's for you, Fire Emblem fans. I specifically left out Genealogy of the Holy War because I'm not about to spoil that for anybody who hasn't played it. I know you're thinking about it. Trust me, I am right there with you. It is one of the best moments in the entire franchise. Even with the spoiler warning in mind, I'm not taking any chances, okay? Okay. And if you do want to hear me talk about genealogy, I actually have a video where I talk about it. Yeah, for once I came prepared. Okay, spoiler time. It should be clear as day that the biggest difference between Kirby and Fire Emblem, narratively, is that Fire Emblem has a lot more text. This results in more character development, more defined personalities, all of that good stuff. Sometimes. Kirby, being more action-packed and cinematic, has a much stronger focus on conveying its themes and emotions through the gameplay, and even character expressions in some of the better instances. The two excel in different areas, but both have tried leaning in the other direction. Take, for instance, Kirby Star Allies. Hey, stop that! I'm gonna talk about the part of the game that everybody likes anyway. What part of the game was that? Oh yeah, forgot. The endgame warps the game's themes of friendship and working together into abuse and sacrifice. And while the factors that always make Kirby games work are in full effect here, the music, the mood, background, sounds, the works, part of what absolutely sells Highness is his lunatic ramblings about the Dark Lord. I mean, for me, you can really just mention the fact that there's a connection to dark matter here, and I, and thousands of other Kirby fans, in fact, are entirely sold. And while the boss fight does a lot to drive that deconstruction of Star Allies' theme home, just look at Highness swinging those mages around. What a guy. The cutscene right after, where Highness willingly sacrifices not only himself, but also the Mage Sisters to resurrect Void, is the high point. The reason why is very simple. It's messed up. He practically kills 3 people, each of whom have the utmost faith of him, and then he offs himself. Highness is so far gone, the concept of life just means nothing to him, and that's, I don't know, kind of uncomfortable. we're still talking about Kirby here, right? With this being a Kirby game, there is tons of flavor text to dive into to learn more about the game. But I want to focus on the Mage Sisters because what we learn about them changes this entire scene from being beyond unsettling to, believe it or not, actually really sad and unbelievably unsettling. The Mage Sisters themselves, at a young age, all experienced near-death situations. Franziska almost froze, Flamberge almost suffocated in a fire, and Zan, after climbing a tall building that's implied she meant to toss herself off of, was struck by a lightning. Each of them were saved by a non-corrupted highness, and all three of them admired him for saving their lives. Yikes! This is actually something that doesn't sound too far off from being in a Fire Emblem story, which segues pretty nicely into how Fire Emblem handles killing off plot important characters through the actual gameplay. This is a video game after all. Well, long story short, it doesn't, unless it feels like it. Oh, you reduced the plot important characters' HP to 0? You're thinking they'll die like one of your units would? Sometimes it does. Sometimes they also retreat. Yes, only sometimes. How fun! But in Fire Emblem's defense, when it does make this work, oh, that's the good stuff. For this one, we have to talk about one of my favorite villains in all of Fire Emblem, Narshan from the Binding Blade. From the very first time you hear him speak in Chapter 3, he's an arrogant, egotistical jerk, and while anybody serving under him is afraid of how ruthless he is, everyone else just kinda sees him as a kind of a joke. Clorinde doesn't care, Murdoch certainly doesn't care, and even Roy doesn't really care enough to have a boss convo with him. Although, really, tell me how many characters Roy cares enough to have a boss convo with. He's a kiss up to his superiors, he's obsessed with his good looks, and just has so many traits that make you hate him. But the more he does, the more you learn to just love to hate the guy. Which makes Chapter 16, where he's given one final chance of redemption from Burn, that much more satisfying. He fights with all he has, easily with one of my favorite boss quotes in any Fire Emblem game, definitely my favorite from Binding Blade, and he fails. His dying words being those of total disbelief make it even more satisfying, and then he dies. He's gone, and you reduced his HP to 0. Your units did this. Your strategy beat him. While most examples of Fire Emblem deaths aren't as great as Narshan's, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Kirby hits a home run every time either. For example, and while I know this is a hot take, the final boss's death in Triple Deluxe, Sectonia, while absolutely a visual spectacle, and it has this incredible sequence so it can't actually be bad, doesn't relate to the main game very well. The Triple Deluxe's visual theme is climbing a beanstalk, and while visually having the final fight be against a queen bee makes sense, there's so little driving the narrative that it just goes down in the books as kind of another cool Kirby fight. I mean, even just talking Kirby final bosses, we've got a good, I don't know, 20 of those just lying around at home that have so many more standout traits. Do you really want one that's just cool? If anything, I think I feel more for Tyranza than I do for Sectonia. And I actually think everybody does at this point. Listen, buddy, I'm sorry, but you gotta move on. With that being said, the major game changer between Kirby and Fire Emblem regarding death is consistency. And, okay, part of this is due to Fire Emblem simply killing off more characters. In Kirby, it's less about killing enemies and more about mauling them until they have a near-death experience. That said, Kirby having recurring characters and even promo art on Twitter adds to the tragedies. For example, we see Tyranza, Susie, and Kirby gazing up at the stars, with Tyranza seeing a constellation of Sectonia, Susie seeing one for Haltman, and Kirby seeing cake. Look, if Kirby Squeak Squad didn't make you cry, need to grow a heart. When it matters, deaths in Kirby leave an impact. In Fire Emblem, more often than not, it doesn't. Fighting Magolor's corpse in Return to Dreamland, as the Master Crown had taken over his entire soul and is just using Magolor's body as a husk to kill, leaves a much bigger impression than having to decide if you'll kill or spare Idun in the Binding Blade. I know, I was just hyping up Narshan before. I love Binding Blade, and I really want to love Idun. But come on, she's in the game for 5 minutes. The Marks in Kirby Superstar had less screen time and is a twist villain, and he was more expensive. And he was more expensive.
Oops, you messed up.
And he was more effective. There are important Fire Emblem deaths told to the story that are well documented as being really poorly done. But there are also some that are equally loved for how hard they smack you with emotion. Rudolph in Echoes, Grail in Path of Radiance, Emerin in Awakening. Oh, on the topic of good deaths, we can't forget Lawrence's death in the first chapter of Mystery of the Emblem. No, not that Lawrence, the one with the better haircut. And okay, it's sad and all, but that's not the hype part. After you talk to Lawrence with Marth, he explodes! But now, I want to talk about Path of Radiance for a little bit. Don't worry, it's just a bit. I know this is a Kirby video and all, but stick around anyway. Trust me, Path of Radiance is really good. This story would only be half of what it turned out to be without Grail's death. There is some great story to gameplay correlation here in how, unwilling to work under a novice like Ike, you can no longer deploy Shinon or Katri after Grail dies, having to re-recruit them later on in the game. Or, in Shinon's case, wonder how the heck you're gonna get a level 1 Rolf to Shinon and just decide it isn't worth it. Ultimately, what makes Grail's death so good is that, up to this point, being stronger than his dad was Ike's ultimate goal, and right before his eyes, he sees the Black Knight effortlessly crush that goal. Ike, who at this point is just a boy with little experience and no confidence in his own abilities, has to work his way up from scratch and avenge his dad by beating the Black Knight. He'll not only achieve his initial goal of becoming strong by his own standards, but he'll also avenge the man that he looked up to by beating his murderer. While I like to think that Grail is definitely the most iconic death for Fire Emblem, I don't know which death would be the best fit for Kirby. Oh yeah, that one. Nice jump scare again. But the one that left the biggest impact for me was in Planet Robobot, the bonkers wild death of President Haltman. Having lost his daughter and spending years trying to find ways to bring her back, he finds a possible way via Star Dream, a computer that can do anything. Between all of the effort put into trying to learn how to use Star Dream and to get it to work in the first place, on top of everything else he did to get to this point, he loses so much of his mind that when his daughter, Susie, comes back, he can't even recognize her at this point. He subconsciously knows that it's her, and because of that, he makes her his assistant, and that's sad and all, but when Haltman takes enough life out of Popstar to activate Star Dream, it takes control over Haltman and works on removing his consciousness, and by the end, deletes all of it, leaving Haltman as an empty husk. The last thing that he naturally holds on to before Star Dream eradicates his very existence for good is how all he wanted was to see his daughter again. There are simpler deaths, such as Nightmare and Kirby's Adventure, that work well for much simpler reasons. 8-bit screaming, "You do your wonders!" And there's also cases like Josia from Canvas Curse, who, I'll be honest, she deserves her own video, but the simple fact that Kirby, of all things, can consistently tackle the subject of death with the levity it deserves has always been one of my favorite things about the franchise. You can play the games just fine and not have to worry about most of what I just said, enjoy the games and not focus so much on the story, but there's a reason so many people talk about Kirby lore, as it were. This rabbit hole goes deep, and trust me, I think it's only gonna get deeper going forward. Thinking on it, actually think it's pretty funny. What many Fire Emblem fans want in regards to things like death is what Kirby fans get. It isn't the game telling you to feel sad, or that this character died and that's sad. You should feel bad. Look at Violet. That's sad. It's the experience of death that makes it such a frightening topic in the first place. A topic that stories such as Fire Emblem could really benefit from. On the flip side, most Kirby fans, they love this stuff, but they want more. Let's see Haltman going crazy trying to save his daughter before the endgame. Let's see Highness save the Mage Sisters from death. And that's what Fire Emblem fans get. When writing the script, my main goal was to compare the way that these two approach this topic and maybe decide who does it better. And that's obviously not what it became, but it's still interesting all the same, comparing how these two very different franchises, at least on the outset, handle this topic. You wouldn't think Kirby would have a shot at even being compared, but I think you can make a case for either one of them handling this topic better. Despite what you may think on either side of the fence, they can both do a fantastic job. But at the end of the day, Fire Emblem wins because Lawrence explodes!